Hello, everyone. I do apologise. I've just spoken to Martin, who's the officer who's sort of trying to get these things happening. There seems to be some kind of hitch with technology. Can we just reconvene on this link again at 10:15, please? We haven't got the...
Chairman, I've now been told the stream has started.
Okay, great, fine. So are we live now?
I'm just double checking. Okay, I've been given the go ahead. So welcome to this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee. My name is Martin Newton from Democratic Services, and the subcommittee today is made up of councillors George, Ledbetter and Sweeney. The first item of business is the appointment of a chair for the meeting. May I ask subcommittee members to nominate a chair for the meeting?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Sweeney.
And is that seconded and agreed?
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Sweeney in the chair.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience. As you will have gathered, this meeting is broadcast live on the Council's YouTube channel, and it's going to be available shortly after the meeting. The agenda has been published on the Council's website, and if you need a copy, you follow the links to your council, democracy and elections, and then decision-making committees, and this is a licensing subcommittee. The way these things work is we need 3 councillors present at all times during this meeting, and we listen to the evidence and the statements put before us, and we'll make a decision. If any of the council members or legal advisor loses connection during the hearing, we have to pause to allow them to rejoin as soon as possible. There's sort of legal reasons for that. Just sort of to help reduce noise and any feedback, please just mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and then when you're called to speak, unmute it, obviously, and then put it back on. So we're going to hear various submissions from officers and from applicants, and also from some residents this morning. Don't use the... if anybody wishes to speak as a member, please indicate so by using the chat function. Don't ask questions of officers or councillors using the chat function, and that you are on video at all times, the way these things are, so just be mindful of things that you don't want people to see at home. Switch off mobile phones as well, and keep them in silent mode. So I think we have everybody who needs to be here this morning. We have Councillor George, if you just say hello, that's great. Councillor Ledbetter, that's great. Guy Bishop, the legal advisor. Good morning. I saw his lips move. Becky Welton, who's the licensing officer.
Good morning.
And we have Mr. Johnson and Graham Hopkins, who are the applicants. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, good morning.
Thank you. And we have Mr. Williams. Are you here, Mr. Williams? Okay, hold on. Mr. Bates?
I'm here.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Bates.
Morning, all.
And Mr. Stamp. Okay.
Good morning.
Again, the way these things work is as you've registered an objection and you've asked to speak, then you're able to come forward. And I think Mr. Williams, if he appears, will be able to as well. Just follow a standard procedure for these hearings. So I have to go through a couple of things. Declarations of interest. Do any councillors, do any members of the subcommittee have a personal or pecuniary interest to declare here?
I just want to register for the purposes of transparency that my son did attend Tiffin School. It was a number of years ago, so I don't think it's material to consideration, but in the interest of openness, I mention it.
Thank you. And Councillor George, I take it that you have
nothing. Councillor George, I take it that you have nothing. No.
Okay. So the parties have already been notified of the usual procedures for licensing hearings as set out on pages 4 to 6 of the agenda. In paragraph 55 on page 5, we deal with notification of decisions following the subcommittee deliberations. We're now in days before we would have asked you to wait in, outside the committee room and called you in for our decision. That doesn't really, not very practical in these circumstances. So a decision will be confirmed by email later today, and full details and reasons will follow in writing within 5 working days. I assume everyone is happy to proceed on the basis of those procedures. So we'll move on to the next item, the main item, which is application from the Kingston 1 Hotel, 88 London Road in Kingston. I now call on Becky Welton, who's the licensing officer, to introduce the report on the application.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to the Kingston 1 Hotel at 88 London Road and was made on the 13th of July 2020. The application seeks a new premises licence to permit the sale by retail of alcohol for consumption on the premises, Monday to Sunday from 10 AM to midnight daily. The application does specify that the final hour between 11 PM and midnight, the sale of alcohol will be to residents of the hotel only. There has been some communication since the application was made between excuse me, Mr. Hopkins and those who made representations. Following that, I can confirm that the request for off sales has now been withdrawn entirely. And conditions are offered in relation to the smoking area and outside drinking, and you should have all received copies of that email. The applicant has advertised the application by way of public notice and also in a local newspaper, and the application was made available on the council's website. All responsible authorities received a copy of the application. The Metropolitan Police, as responsible authority for the Prevention of Crime and Disorder, and Trading Standards Officer, as responsible authority for the protection of children from harm, initially raised some concerns with the application, but following consultation, the applicant has addressed those concerns by making amendments to their operating schedule. They have agreed conditions with both of those responsible authorities, and they are set out at Annex 3 of your report. In accordance with the Council's licensing policy, 972 addresses were consulted in writing and informed that an application had been made. 8 valid representations were received from other parties, including from a local residents association. Those representations make reference to matters that relate to the prevention of crime and disorder, prevention of public nuisance, and protection of children from harm licensing objectives. And those representations are attached to Annex 4. You will note that there is reference to planning decisions and planning matters within some of those representations. And obviously the committee will be aware that whilst sort of linked, planning and licensing are 2 separate regimes. In considering the report, the subcommittee is required to take into account the Secretary of State's guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act and our licensing policy, as well as the 4 licensing objectives. You are asked to determine the application having regard to the representations received and any evidence heard at the hearing in accordance with the following options: to grant the application as requested, to grant the application subject to such conditions as the authority considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives, to exclude from the scope of the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates, or to refuse the application. And I'm happy to take any questions if there are any, Chair.
Oh, Chairman, you're muted.
Sorry. Apologies, everyone. Do we have any questions from councillors?
Not from me.
Okay, thank you. I just need to, and sorry.
Chair.
Yeah.
Guy Bishop, legal advisor here. Apologies for my technical unavailability earlier.
I was just going to ask that when Mr. Hopkins presents, or when Mr. Johnson presents, that perhaps they explain exactly the conditions that they now have added and proposed. I have seen on the email that was sent the other day, but I think it's just worth getting proper details of what the actual conditions will be when they do their presentation, so it's clear.
Okay, thank you very much. So I now call on the applicant, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Hopkins, to give a summary of the application. There's no real time limit on this, but I think we find that usually around 5 minutes is adequate. So hopefully that will cover it. But if you need more, just that's okay too. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I would need just slightly longer than that.
Fine.
That's like writing this out. Apologies for the technical problems. It worked 2 days ago when I spoke to your clerk. But I don't know what's happened. We're in Cornwall at the moment, and the reception is not very good. If I start by saying that the Kingston One Hotel is a genuine hotel with 22 guest bedrooms. It will have a bar, and in the near future, a restaurant on the ground floor, both of which will be ancillary to the primary use of the building as a hotel. And both the bar and the restaurant will be primarily for use by hotel guests, but non-residents, members of the public, will be allowed to use the facilities. Chair, you'll be aware this premises isn't in the CIZ and has to be considered purely on its own merits. And at this time, I would like to draw your attention to the amendments made, which I'm grateful to Ms. Welton for putting in for me. But very simply, we've withdrawn the off sales, we've listened to the residents, withdrawn the off sales, and withdrawn the request for drinking outside the premises. So the request before you, Chair, is simply for sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises, where the alcohol will be consumed totally within the premises. The hotel's not open yet. They hope to open at the end of the month, and the bar will open at the same time. The restaurant is still being worked on and will be opened a little later, but I'm advised by the end of this year. With regard to Mr. Bishop's request, the condition we're proposing to prevent outside drinking that I've discussed with the Residents Association and with Mr. Williams is that no glasses, bottles or alcoholic drinks may be taken outside the premises at any time. And we believe, Chair, that this will ensure no alcohol will be taken out of the premises, as I say, at any time. And the staff will be able to monitor that both by physical checks and by use of the hotel's CCTV system. Moving on from that, one of the points was raised by the residents is the 3 parking spaces to the rear. 2 will be used as the drop-off and pick-up point for the hotel, because obviously with the road junction on London Road and the neighbouring, I think it's Howard Road, there is no parking facility there. The 3rd space of the hotel will be used for disabled residents. Another concern the residents raised, Chair, was the smoking area, which will actually be to the front of the hotel in London Road, with an appropriate container provided for customer use and will be regularly emptied. And again, as you've heard, no drinks will be allowed to be taken outside by smokers. And I think that's will be covered by the condition that I have just offered. To clarify, there is no request for live or recorded music. And it's our client's intention, Chair, that music will only be played at a background level, which, as you'll be aware, is not itself licensable, but that will apply both in the bar and when it opens in the restaurant. Anything louder, I have spoken to Mr. Johnson and his director, and both are of the belief, and I would agree with them, that anything louder would not be conducive to the primary use of the Kingston One Hotel as a hotel. So there'll be no music, and hopefully that will reassure the residents. As you know, Chair, until 11, live and recorded music is deregulated, so we can only give an undertaking in respect to that there will be no loud music, and we're content with background.
Well,
because while it's deregulated,
well, you could impose, Mr. Hopkins, you could impose a condition that effectively saying that you won't do live and recorded music.
Well, we're happy to offer that, Chair, but many councils say it's unenforceable, of course. But we haven't asked for anything after 11, so the residents don't have to be concerned by that. So there'll be no live music at any time. That's the undertaking the clients are prepared to give. And if you feel it's appropriate to put that on as a condition, Chair, we'd have no objection. So if that helps there,
Okay,
I hope
thank
it
you.
does. So moving on from that, another concern was clarity over the actual hours. So what we've asked for is for the sale of alcohol on the premises, 10 till midnight daily all week. 10 till 11 in the morning will primarily be, will only be for residents. So if somebody wanted to have a champagne breakfast, which will be few and far between, I imagine, but they'd have that flexibility and facility to do so. And last orders for non-residents will be at 10:30 and closed to the public, as you'll see on the application form, is 11. So the public will be out of the building by 11, and the last hour in the evening is only for residents who want to have a final drink in the bar or buy one to take up to their room. So 10 till 11 and 11 till midnight is purely for residents, and 11 till 11 basically we're asking for both residents share and the general public when they're using the restaurant. We've asked for longer opening hours from 6:30 onwards. That is primarily for big guests to have their breakfast, or if passing trade wants to have breakfast, because obviously we want to run the hotel restaurant when it opens at full capacity. So there's nothing underhand there. It's just for non-residents to be able to go in and have breakfast early in the morning. You've heard about the conditions our clients have offered. I've just had another look through them. They've been agreed with the police. That's Annex 3 and covers everything we wanted to cover. CCTV, staffing levels, Challenge 25, etc., and training. That's been expanded, Chair, at Annex 3. Appropriate signage will be displayed asking the customers to respect neighbouring residents and leave quietly. Ditto with smokers to keep the smokers quiet. You'll see they've got an incident book where anything that needs recording will be recorded. This hotel, Chair, is intended to be a premium hotel, as will the bar and the restaurant when it opens in due course. It'll be a smart dress code operating in the bar and restaurant. Pricing will reflect that role, with, for example, making a couple of prices. A pint of Corona will be $5.95 minimum. A pint of Yakima, which I understand is another lager, is $5.65. Pint of Hog IPA will be $5.65, and a bottle of wine. Now, the bar and restaurant will operate on fine wines. The minimum price for a bottle of wine at the Kingston one will be £25. So I would suggest to you, Chair, that the bar will not be attractive to heavy drinkers or people who are likely to become intoxicated and become a nuisance. Pricing is a fair way of doing it, and our clients have looked at this responsibly and decided that's the way they want to go. They want it to be somewhere for somebody to have a meal and enjoy their stay. There are no representations from the RAs, which is good. Discussions with the police and trading standards, as you've heard, were profitable. They came to an agreement, so we've got nothing outstanding from responsible authorities, and I would suggest that now indicates that they're satisfied the objectives will be fully promoted. We did, as you've heard from Ms. Welton, reach out to the residents. I've spoken by email to Mr. Bates, to Mr. Williams and Mr. Stamp, who responded and engaged with us. And I have to say I'm grateful to all three of them for doing so. It was a great help. As a result of replies from Mr. Bates, Mr. Williams and Mr. Stamp, our clients did listen to what the residents were saying further. They had done already, but they went further and have considerably amended the application based on residents' concerns. As I've indicated, and I don't propose to go through those again. We've clarified the hours for them. We've agreed the smoking area, the parking, no off sales, no outside drinking. What I would ask you to do is not to tie the hours we've requested for on sales to neighbouring premises, because that's neither necessary in this case, or I would suggest you appropriate. The longer hours at the beginning of the day and the evening are just for residents, and you'll be aware many hotels do have those longer hours for bona fide residents. Chair, I think we've reached a good level of agreement with, and I hope we have, with the Tricorn Residents Association, with Mr. Williams and hopefully with Mr. Stamp, address their concerns raised by other residents. I will just comment on one that was made, which includes the concerns that children would have to pass people who had been or were drinking outside the hotel. Of course, well, that's now been removed and won't be a concern. We'll only have some smokers outside. They will be monitored. They won't be taking drinks outside. They won't be allowed to. And I would submit that our clients have amply demonstrated to you that they are and will continue to be responsible and caring operators who want to work with the residents who will, of course, themselves be welcomed as guests if they'd like to go there. The licensing objectives will be promoted, and that this hotel will be an asset locally into Kingston as a whole. And on that basis, Chair, I would ask you to grant the amended application. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Do you have any? I'll just turn to the subcommittee members. Councillor Ledbetter, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Just one question about the CCTV coverage. I noticed that one of the objectors were asking what the CCTV coverage would cover. So would it cover the alleyway beside the hotel?
Councillor, can I ask Mr. Johnson to reply to that? Because I don't want to mislead you. I know it's under the police condition. It's got to cover all areas to which the public have access, but that would be people accessing the hotel. So perhaps Mr. Johnson could answer that.
Yeah, no problem. I can do that. So the CCTV covers all exits and entrances to the building, and part of that on the back disabled entrance, you will be able to see partly the alleyway. It doesn't have it high enough so you see all the way down the alleyway. You'll be able to see people entering and exiting that area.
Councillor George, do you have any questions for the applicant?
No, I don't actually. No,
okay,
that's good.
I do have a question. It's really for Mr. Johnson, actually. You know, I take it Mr. Hopkins is advising you on this application, but I'd like to understand. You know, as proprietors, you know, you have to be responsible persons. And could you just tell us a little bit about your experience? Have you and your fellow directors, have you got experience of running these types of establishments? And have you been sort of able to keep, you know, good relations with neighbours and responsible authorities while doing so?
Okay, yeah. So on myself, I've worked in hospitality for a number of years. I've worked in hotels before and never had any issues with that when it comes to that. I've never run a hotel completely as manager before, been the assistant manager of pubs before this. The director has also not ventured into this area before, but has run a number of very successful businesses and continues to do so whilst running this hotel now. The advice we've gathered from Mr. Hopkins has basically been helping us with the application, maybe making it more clear that what we were trying to achieve was in the timings of the application for the residents. You couldn't really put that on the application, so now it's been able to be voiced and talked about to make people aware of how we want to do it.
Okay.
But we, as I said, Mr. Bonelli, the directors have run a number of companies before this and been very successful with them all. And myself have eventually I've been in the hospitality industry for a long time, and we're getting head chefs that have done the same, have been in the industry for a long time as well to ensure the success of the company.
Okay. So do you envisage, you know, how busy will your bars and restaurants be if everything is going according to how you hope?
Well, it's a bit different these days with the whole COVID situation, with the social distancing aspect of all this, of how many people we can have in. Might have been a bit different than it would have been before, but primarily this hotel is a hotel, and the ambience of it will be to encourage the guests to come down and enjoy a meal and a drink down here, but it's not a place that we want to have filled to the rafters with drinkers having a rowdy time and whatever goes with that. It's purely to facilitate the hotel. So idea of having a nice restaurant with good food below it for breakfast, for lunch and for dinner.
Okay.
Passing trade for more for breakfast for the parting trade, but it's predominantly facilitating the hotel. And with COVID and everything else going around with the social distancing side of that, you can't have many people in here, which will probably lend that self to the idea anyway, that you can't have many people down in the restaurant, in the bar. We're a premium style bar. It's not going to be the kind of people we want in this place. This isn't going to be people that are going to be having rowdy times and everything else that goes with that. It's a premium place that we want to have the hotel guests enjoying, and then going to bed and sleeping very restfully, rather than having a bar downstairs that's noisy and keeping them awake. It's to facilitate the hotel.
Okay. And can I ask, can you just expand a little bit on the? Did you have meetings or telephone calls or correspondence with some of the residents who've put in objections, and how do you plan to, if granted this license, deal with your relations with residents going forward?
So myself haven't been in direct contact. It's been Mr. Hopkins has done the majority of the emails. We've obviously been back and forward ourselves, giving the responses to him. But my thought on all of this is that the more we have help working with the residents or the police or whoever it is that's going to be able to give us advice on how we're doing things is a benefit. I think we can, as much as we can work hand in hand with everyone around us, the residents could be the drinkers and using the facility as a nice restaurant themselves anyway. So why would we try and deter them and get a negative reputation with them, a negative relationship with them, when we can use them as, and they can hopefully enjoy the place as much as everyone else does. Any other responses and stuff between the residents and myself has been directed through Mr. Hopkins.
Okay, thank you. And again, so going forward, how would you do that effectively, do you think?
Well, the door's always open for anyone that's got any issues, if they've got any concerns about how things have been done, any complaints they've seen, or anything they might have noticed that we haven't done. The door will always be open. They can always come and find me when I'll be here most of the time anyway, so they can always come and find me and have a word, email me in with any concerns they might have had, and I'm very, very keen to work with rather than against, as works across the board. So if there are any concerns, find me, ring the hotel to speak to me, and they can be addressed directly straight away. I can be open and help as much as I can. Is how my thoughts on the whole.
Okay, thank you.
Situation are we working with residents?
Thank you. Okay, so I don't think we have any further questions. If I'll just look, Councillor Lidbetter, do you have?
Apology, just a couple of little points, if I may. So it's about the front of the hotel. I see that you're going to be having people only smoking in front of the hotel on the London Road. But I didn't see anything about the entrance and exits late at night. So I noticed that some of those who wrote in wondered if it would be possible to have guests, sort of non-residential visitors, using only the London Road if they're leaving late at night, say after 9 o'clock. And I just wondered whether that's practical or something you've thought about to minimise any noise to residential streets behind the hotel.
The answer to that is for the ambience of the restaurant. There's doors that open directly into the restaurant. So at night we're going to try and keep those doors shut, purely because traffic noise, that it doesn't really lend itself to sitting with the doors open, or even if they are coming and going. We have thought about building like an inn that will reduce that noise. So it could be that we have guests going out that way, but it still doesn't really it doesn't lend itself to that, and it's a nicer way of bringing people into the restaurant and having them waiting at the bar, waiting for their table or whatever, through the Howard Road entrance. But we can manage that as well. But there's also a side exit at the back that we could try and direct smokers to. But the London Road side of it doesn't really lend itself to as an entrance and exit after lunch period, because people enjoying a nice dinner that's going to be quite expensive potentially, then having a traffic car or cars flying past them, it's not exactly the ambience we want to be promoting.
Understood, but you will be asking smokers to stick to the London Road rather than behind the hotel.
Yeah, they'll be directed that way. There'll be the facility for the ashtrays and everything else out there will be there. We can look at the CCTV that's right below that area. We can say, guys, and if they are doing it, which we hope they won't do, we can very quickly say to not do it again. And if we need to direct them that way, a area marked off that way, we can do.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay. Right. So to move on, we do, if required, this is the moment in the agenda when we have the responsible authorities can make remarks. The trading standard officers or the Met Police have been satisfied by the applicant, and so there are no representations to consider from responsible authorities. So I now come to representations from the other persons who are present. And as I say, sorry, did someone say anything? I'll carry on. Okay. So there are three, I think, possibly two or maybe three of those present. So I would first call on, is it Mr. Williams who isn't here? Okay. Mr. Williams not here. Okay. So Mr. Bates.
Sorry, Mr. Williams, I am here. I was trying to unmute myself.
Sorry. Okay.
I had to dial in. Apologies for that.
That's all right. That's fine. So Mr. Williams, what you wanted to, you have some concerns. Would you like to address the subcommittee about those concerns, please?
Sure. And apologies, you can't see me. I'm actually in a waiting room at the moment, so I've dialed in. So thanks for inviting me to this subcommittee. As the applicant has outlined, there has been a bit of email correspondence regarding this application, and I'm grateful to the applicant for taking into account my views on this. In particular, no longer requesting off sales, specifying that there will not be any outside drinking. I think that was a key concern of mine and other neighbours as well. Given the proximity of schools and equally the potential for disruption. And I'm also grateful to them for amending the licensing hours. So as I understand it, from 10 a.m. until 11, it will be for residents only and not for the general public, and thus the general public can only come in after 11 o'clock. So I think that's very sensible. Another concern, obviously, was the music. We're happy to hear that it will only be background music for use as you would expect in a restaurant. I think the legal officer brought up a point about a condition in the license earlier in this discussion. I mean, if the applicant is willing to offer that as a condition, from my perspective, I'd be happier if there was a specific condition on music put into the license. And then just on the smoking area, so I'm glad to hear that the smoking area is proposed to be on the London Road side of things to try and, again, minimise disruption to residents. I guess I would just question how that's actually going to work if, as the applicant says, you know, people are going to be coming in and out of the restaurant on the Albert Road side. Do we reasonably expect people to then walk around the corner to go and use the smoking area? I'm not so sure. I have a suspicion that people will just congregate outside the door on the Albert Road side. And, you know, there are residential flats right opposite that, and equally there are houses just a few metres away. So I don't know if that's something that councillors might wish to consider, again, just in terms of which door is being used for entry and exit. But generally, you know, I think the applicant has responded to our concerns, and I hope very much that it will be the premium, reputable hotel that is outlined.
Okay.
And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Councillor George, do you have any questions for Mr. Williams?
I don't know, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Ledbetter, do you have any questions for Mr. Williams?
No, thank you.
Okay, and neither do I. So thank you, Mr. Williams. I've noted the points, and also we'll come to those things in terms of smoking. We'll talk about that, I think, when we come to consider this after all we've heard from everyone. Okay, so now, Mr. Bates, would you like to make your representation, please, to the committee?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to see that the applicants have addressed, I think, all the concerns in the sorry, I should have said I'm speaking on behalf of Tricorn, the Residents Association. Our membership is basically the 3 roads that form the triangle of streets here: Albert Road, Victoria Road, and Church Road. So it's the immediate neighbours, but not the neighbours behind the Hotel Minerva Road. They have their own association, who I don't think you've heard from. Anyway, we had 4 main points in our objection that our membership reached consensus on, and these all seem to have been addressed. The early morning opening was actually a very important factor, and the condition that alcohol sales will be for residents only between 10 and 11 is gratefully received. In the email I had from Mr. Hopkins, it was given as an undertaking. I'm not quite certain if an undertaking is the same as a licence condition. I certainly would like it to be a condition of the licence, and the same would go for the evening residents only slot. The provision of off sales was important, and that's been withdrawn, so that's good. Music seems to be clear, although I am a little bit worried that the right to play music at the moment may be maintained. And then drinking and smoking outside, I share the concerns about that. The obvious place for a smoker to have a quick fag is the little triangle of ground which is owned by the hotel premises by the Albert Road entrance. The Albert Road entrance always seemed to me to be the one most people used. It's certainly the one I used to use when it was a pub I went to. But provided, smoking, with the sort of clientele they're looking for, I don't think it's going to be a problem. So with my only concern being, provided the standards that they are setting us now, this is fantastic. And Kingston can use a hotel and a restaurant like this. A lot of the houses around here haven't got spare rooms. My friends will want to stay there. I'll want to use the restaurant. This is great. But if standards slip over time, I don't want there to be too much room for manoeuvre, and too much room for them to lower their standards to let things go downhill, which is what happened to the previous establishment when it was the Moot House. That started off with, it was going to be a bit of a gastro pub. I never got a meal there, but I mustn't tar them with the old brush, so that I don't want to bring the history in. But we have had experience of things not working properly, and I think that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bates. I think before I ask councillors questions, could I ask the legal officer, could you just clarify the difference between an undertaking and a condition? I think it would just be helpful for us all to revisit that definition.
I think undertaking was just used in negotiations. The reality is that the only control of the authorization of a premises license will be by way of condition. So effectively, if you are minded to control things, then you would impose conditions to do that. Undertakings are where a legal orientated person, or indeed in this situation a representative, is saying this is what I'm proposing to solve the particular problem, and that's why they put forward various proposed conditions that you can think about.
Okay, I think that's helpful for everyone. So, Councillor Lidbetter, or Councillor George, you have a question.
Well, I was just going to follow on from the legal officer, actually, because it was mentioned earlier and it's been picked up by a couple of the objectors about music and whether there's going to be whether there's a need for condition for live and recorded music. I'd be grateful for a bit of an explanation on that.
Maybe I can address you, or maybe Rebecca can.
Anyway. Thanks.
So the Live Music Act 2015 essentially deregulated a number of activities, and one of those was live music and recorded music as well. And the deregulation allows any premises who holds an alcohol license to have live or recorded music for a restricted audience between the hours of 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. without the need for a license. Now, you can reinstate live or recorded music as regulated licensable activities upon review, for example, if there are issues. But generally, it is agreed, as Mr. Hopkins already mentioned earlier, that conditions relating to regulated entertainment between those deregulated hours would not be enforceable.
Thank you. We try to stick. Do you have something very quick to say, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I just basically wanted to put everyone's mind at ease again. We are a hotel, and there is going to be no live music, no loud music, because we are fundamentally a hotel. And unless we have the entire every room in the building downstairs for a gig, which is never going to happen, we will be not having live music events. Simple as that.
Okay, thank you. Right, so I think any further questions from Mr. Bates? I think we're okay to move on. So we have now a final representation from Mr. Stamp. Good morning, Mr. Stamp. Would you like to make your comments and concerns, please?
I would. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for inviting me to address the meeting. Just to say a little bit about myself, I live 28 Minerva Road, which is the closest property on Minerva Road, backing on to Albert Road. So obviously the closest property to the Kingston One Hotel. I must stress that in my remarks, I'm speaking in a private capacity. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Minerva Road community or association in any wider sense, although I know that in the past that they've used the old Moot House, and I'm sure they will be welcoming the arrival of the hotel and the opportunity to use it as well. I too also welcome the, like Mr. Williams, Mr. Bates, the safeguards and conditions that have been added to the license following the correspondence of recent days. So I won't go into those in any detail because I think we've covered them. I do have a couple of more specific questions regarding the details of how that would work, particularly the closing time policy, and what will happen at 11 o'clock. I addressed this to Mr. Kingston, whether the doors, particularly on the Albert Road side, will be shut at 11 o'clock, and therefore no one will be able to gain entrance, or essentially people will still be allowed into the hotel, but then will be told that they can't be served a drink. I also have a question about if, say, I had a friend who was staying at the hotel, would I then be permitted, would my friend be permitted to buy me a drink between 11 and 12, and therefore would I be able to stay in the hotel and avail myself of a drink between that period? A couple of other questions relating to the running of the hotel. Obviously, I welcome what Mr. Johnson has said about the premium nature of the hotel and the aspirational nature of the hotel, and obviously I welcome that. I would have a question about why the restaurant isn't opening at the same time as the rest of the hotel. Obviously, I understand that the two things aren't necessarily contiguous, but you said that that can be expected around by the end of the year. I'd be interested to know, until that point, what will customers, residents and non-residents be able to get lunch and dinner, for instance? Will there be any hot food, or will it only be, essentially, will the only meal being served to residents be breakfast? In terms of wider issues, these haven't really been touched upon. The history of antisocial behaviour in this area, which is one that I know the residents of Minerva Road and to a degree Albert Road have had to contend with for many years, and I won't go into the details of that. Some of the problems are problems that are associated with passageways all over Kingston and in urban areas. But obviously there is a more deep-seated problem we've had for many years in the community with drug use and drug gangs. And what I would say is that this is no reflection on the old Moot House, which I think was a reputable establishment. I would agree with Mr. Bates that its character did change over the time that it was open, but we have noticed since it closed, there has been a reduction in antisocial behaviour in the passageway between Minerva Road and Albert Road. So we're conscious that we think that we're beginning to get on top of the problem, thanks to the efforts of the council and the police, and we wouldn't want anything to stem that progress and see the tide turning the other way. So I am obviously welcoming, very appreciative of the fact that we CCTV. I'm a little concerned that it won't cover the whole of the passageway. I am concerned that any issues relating to antisocial behaviour might not necessarily be confined to the immediate vicinity of the hotel, but could manifest themselves in the passageway, where at the moment there is no CCTV. And in the past, obviously, because of the rather quiet and secretive nature of the passageway, there are people who feel that they can get away with things in the passageway that they wouldn't get away with on a residential street, for instance. So I'm very keen for there to be some formal mechanism, whether it's a working group with the hotel or the council, involving the hotel, the council and local residents, to address any problems that may ensue over the coming months. And this could be a formally or informally constituted, whether it's on a kind of quarterly basis or a twice a year, for an opportunity for us to raise any concerns that we may have. We think that problems that are emanating from I would not say from residents of the pub. I have no concerns about them, but I do have some concerns about walk-in trade, particularly late at night, and some of the knock-on effects for the passageway and for residents, many of whom, like me, we have young families. So I think I would like to see that some formal arrangement whereby residents can feed in directly to the hotel, with perhaps the council as a mediator. So I think those are the main concerns I have. I've been interested to know what I'm a football fan. Do you see the hotel offering live football coverage on TV? Is that a market that you think is going to be a lucrative one for your customers, or something that will pull customers into the bar, particularly over the weekend? And do you also see yourself attracting customers who are going to live games, whether that's at AFC Wimbledon or Twickenham or other live sporting venues?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stamp, for raising those questions. It's quite a number. Guy, as legal advisor, can I just what happens now is councillors can ask questions of Mr. Stamp, and then the final part of the meeting is we ask the applicant to make some closing remarks. You may choose in your closing remarks, Mr. Johnson.
Sorry, I'm just going to sort of assist.
But yeah, I just wanted you to clarify.
Yeah,
whether those questions can be answered.
Yeah, I think they can. The whole point of a licensing hearing is it's an informal discussion. So you're quite able to have Mr. Johnson, who I can see is wanting to respond, I'm sure, to some of those points. So I don't see that being a problem. But obviously, you'll have the opportunity for summing up, in which you could do it. But it might be helpful, just as part of this meeting at this stage, for those responses to be given. I think that's a very fair way of dealing with it.
Okay, so we'll just, if you're happy, Mr. Johnson, I'll just ask you to answer those questions. I did make notes, so I think
I'll try to as well.
Okay, fine. All right, I'll check as you go through them, see if you missed anything.
I apologise for it being a long list, but obviously this is the only opportunity we have.
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfectly fine.
Okay, so the first one was regarding the time of the doors, anyone entering after 11 o'clock. Simply won't be happening. Everyone will be leaving by latest 11 o'clock, other than hotel guests. Last orders will be 10:30. There'll be a drink up period of that half an hour, and by 11 o'clock, everyone will be asked to leave. That includes friends of residents, because our premises license and the licenses simply won't allow that. So that's basically that one sorted out. By 10:30, the last order is called. No one will be able to come into the pub either after 11 to 10:30 either. They'll be saying we're shutting. It's the last orders have been called, so it's only people in the pub that might want an last drink. And certainly nothing served before, say, 11:15, when the time for drinking is less. So it's 10:30 is the drink up, or the last order is called, and by 11 o'clock, everyone, including guests, friends that might be drinking here, will be asked to leave. The benefit of the 11 till 12 extended hours on the license was purely to have our bases covered if a guest would like to take a drink to their room. That's the mentality of the idea. It was to take another drink from the bar, a pint of whatever it might be, a bottle of wine, to their room with them. It was the idea is that there would be no one down here really after 11 o'clock. The restaurant isn't opening quite yet, purely because we don't know how the situation is going to go regarding COVID. We're very mindful of the fact that we might not be able to bring in as much money through this social distancing and everything else that way, and we haven't really got the staff in place for that either yet. So it's purely going to be a beautiful breakfast menu from 7 o'clock for our hotel guests, as well as passing trade, which will finish around 9:30. Any remaining pastries or whatever that might be available still will be on the counter, but nothing fresh will be made, i.e. no made to order breakfasts. And then from 12 o'clock till 2:30, there'll be a lunch, 2:30. There'll be no food served period for the evening guests. So, unfortunately, we haven't got to that position yet. And with the way things are with COVID, it's better to find our feet first and get the first 2 meals of the day sorted out, and then find our feet for the dinner. And there are restaurants around this area for it. And it's definitely something we want to address. It's going to be fine dining where it is there. But like I say, it's purely to find our feet and make sure we get everything right in the first place, and then get it right one hit on the dinner side of it. The passageway, I totally understand what you're referring to there. I know exactly what everyone what gets up to in that area. And as like I mentioned before, there is CCTV trying to cover as much of it as we can. It isn't, however, our property, and we can't really therefore have a camera looking straight down that way. If we were to do that, it would just get smashed anyway. Someone would remove it, put graffiti on it, it wouldn't be a way of maintaining that. We can try and do what we can from our side, but like I've mentioned, it's not actually our property. So we can try, and I also think that I'm surprised that you said that the crime's gone down since the hotel's been shut. I thought it completely opposite. I would have thought it would have been increased because there's a redundant building there. Now that it's a hotel, I think with it being monitored, there'll be the people in the building 24/7 pretty much, that there will be less activity purely because it's now got there's people inside the building. So there'll be censored lights that come on when people walk past the back of our property that will deter people from getting up to stuff they shouldn't do. There'll be people in the building for a lot longer, and if we spot stuff that's going on that we know full well it shouldn't be, it will be our responsibility to ensure that we report that to police. Simple as that. Sporting events was one of your points, Mr. Stamp. No is the answer to that. We won't be having TVs downstairs in the bar area whatsoever. There is TVs in all the rooms, but there won't be any events going on downstairs. Once mentioned before, it's a premium idea. It's a premium wine bar, not a bar. We won't be showing any football or anything like that. We haven't got the license in place for that. We don't want it. That's not the clientele we're going for. Is there anything else I've missed? I think that's basically what every note I've put down.
I think that's comprehensive.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
What I would ask, can I make a previous point about the smoking on Albert Road and London Road? I totally understand what you're saying, that people might smoke on Albert Road rather than London. So if that starts being the case, what would the residents suggest we do to stop this and help us in a way of trying to minimise the impact to the residents on Albert Road, because we can try and direct people that way with having the ashtrays and everything else on London Road. But would you, if we were to find that people just walk out onto Albert Road, what's the answer that you guys suggest we try and work with? Is it building a sided area that might reduce noise, or sorry?
There might be signage.
Sorry?
There might be signage, at the back saying only smokers only allowed to smoke outside on London Road.
Yeah, definitely.
That may help. Yeah.
Sorry, it's Mr. Williams here. I don't know if you can hear me. May I just address that point, Chair?
Yeah, sure.
So in response to your question, what could you do about it? I mean, I think it does come down to which door is being used for entry and exit. I just think, myself probably included, that people are a bit lazy. If they go out to the Albert Road door, they're just going to have a fag on by the door on Albert Road. So if you do want people to smoke on London Road, then use of that door would seem the obvious mechanism for getting that done as much as possible. And I think you mentioned earlier that you were considering, I take the point that you don't want traffic noise in the restaurant, but are you going to have the doors open all of the time, or is there some mechanism that you could use within the hotel or just outside it to try and reduce the noise impact for the restaurant, so that you could use the London Road doors?
So predominantly in the evenings, the Albert Road side will be the one we ask residents and walk-in trade to come into. We will basically have the door closed on London Road purely for the ambience of the restaurant and bar area. And it's the entrance for the hotel guests that side as well. But that's not to say that we couldn't have that door unlocked and direct people straight out that way if they'd like to have a cigarette, and have signage up around the area, again, directing them that way.
Okay. Thank you. I think I've noted that there are going to be operational issues, I think, that will impact or be of interest to residents. I have noted the applicant's willingness to work with you. So I'm thinking that for some of these items, when we come to decisions, that a lot of these things are not set in stone, and if there are issues, people can come back. But usually, it's working together is the most efficient way of resolving any arising issues, rather than bringing it to the council. So I detect, because having done a number of these, that there is probably a number of things may work over time, but I note that if you try and work together, it may be resolved, and if it isn't, then councillors, your local councillors, can be, I think, part of that dialogue that you maybe want to start about resolving some of the issues that I guess are neighbourhood issues rather than attributable to a premise or not. So I think we've now reached the stage where the applicants are invited to make any closing remarks based on anything you've heard as a result of this hearing today.
I think we've covered it with the discussions we've had. The only other last one I maybe would say is the I think it was Mr. Bates made a comment regarding the place going downhill. We've got a 20-year lease on this building, and I don't see myself leaving here anytime soon. So once this place is in my interest and everyone else's interest in the works here, to maintain the standards of this building and the hotel and the clientele we get. So I would say that with a 20-year view of trying to maintain a high standard, if things slip, please let me know, because I'm not doing my job properly. But I would rather that we didn't do that, and the reviews from everyone that comes in here are high, and that we, for the next 20 years, can work with each other and then having a very successful business in Kingston.
Okay. Thank you. So we've now, just checking my agenda. I don't think.
Chair, may I make a comment on behalf of Mr. Johnson?
For us to this. Pardon?
Hello there, Chair. It's Mr. Hopkins. I just wanted to make a couple of comments on behalf of Mr. Johnson. Just to draw your attention to the
Perfect.
fact that
Yeah, that's fine. And then we'll.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that the past history of the venue, of course, can't be held against what is a new business. They can't be blamed for the antisocial behaviour of the past. Mr. Johnson has made it plain that he's contactable at any time in person or by email. And really, as I say, this is a new business moving forward. One solution I could have just for the smoking area, I note the concerns of residents about that. Having had a pub, I know it can be a nuisance. So what we used to do was have the notices that Mr. Johnson has mentioned, and maybe staff just say to them as they go out, please go around to London Road, where it will be monitored and compliance can be checked on the CCTV anyway. So if that helps, that's my final thoughts. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. So what will happen now is this brings to an end this hearing. So members of the subcommittee and the officers, we're going to now discuss what we've heard this morning and make a decision on the application, and you'll be informed of that by email later today. And as I say, you'll then have written formal notice in the usual way within 5 working days. So no, thank you all for your contributions this morning. I think it's all been very helpful. So thank you for your time, and I wish you all well. Good day.